Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
It feels like debt is just everywhere in America these days. You hear about trillions in consumer debt, student loans hanging over people, massive corporate debts. It's huge.
It really is. And it's not just the numbers, is it? It's the human side. The stress, the
And they're
anxiety.
kept up at night worrying.
Yeah.
And they even say financial stress is like a top reason for relationship problems.
Exactly. So the big question we're tackling is this just how it is now? Is racking up debt unavoidable, or is there maybe another way to think about it?
That's where we're getting into. We're looking at managing debt, but through a specific lens, these sort of timeless biblical ideas about handling finances, about stewardship.
Yeah. So for this deep dive, we want to really unpack what our sources say. What are the real risks if you don't manage debt well? What are the upsides if you do?
And maybe find some practical ways to actually get free from it based on these principles.
Sounds good. So where do we start? What's the sort of foundational view on debt from this perspective?
Okay, yeah, let's start there. What does the Bible actually say about owing money?
Well, the general feel isn't like a strict never do this. It's more like proceed with extreme caution. The potential dangers are really emphasized.
Okay.
There's that verse in Proverbs 22.7. It's pretty stark. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender.
Oof. Slave to the lender. That's intense. What does that really mean for us today, being a slave in that sense?
Well, think about freedom, right? Financial freedom. When you owe money, part of your future income isn't really yours anymore. It's already spoken for.
Right, it's obligated.
Exactly. And that can subtly control your choices. Maybe you can't take a lower paying job you'd love, or you can't move easily.
Or maybe you can't give as generously when you want to, or handle an unexpected, emergency expense.
Precisely. It becomes this filter for your decisions. Your debt payments are non-negotiable, so other things have to give way.
And one of our sources, that book, Your Finances God's Way, it really leans into this, doesn't it? It has whole sections on God's view of debt and how to avoid or get rid of it.
Yeah, the fact that it dedicates specific chapters to it really tells you something. It shows how central this idea is.
So it's not automatically a sin to borrow, but it's risky, something
Yeah.
you need serious wisdom for.
That's a good way to put it. It requires real care because the potential for ending up in, well, financial bondage is significant. It's not something to jump into lightly.
Okay, so the baseline is caution. Let's dig into the why behind that caution. What are the specific downsides if debt isn't managed carefully?
Well, the sources point to a few big ones. The first really flows from that Proverbs verse, that feeling of financial bondage.
Right, being trapped.
Yeah. Poorly managed debt just limits your options so much. You can't easily put money towards, say, long-term goals, saving, investing, giving.
Because the debt payments eat up that potential surplus.
Exactly. Your creditors basically get first dibs on your income, dictating your priorities in a way.
Okay, that makes sense. Limited choices. What's the next big risk?
The second one is the toll it takes on your well-being, your mental and emotional health.
Ah, the stress factor.
Definitely. The sources really link worrying about money, especially debt,
Right.
to higher stress, more anxiety. And it's not abstract. It means, losing sleep, relationships getting strained.
Yeah, that constant low-level hum of worry in the background. It's draining.
It really is. That constant pressure can just suck the joy out of things.
It really underscores that this isn't just about numbers on a page. It's deeply human.
Oh.
Okay, and the third risk?
The third one is quite tangible. It's reducing your future standard of living.
How so?
Well, think about interest payments, especially on high-interest debt, like credit cards maybe. That money you're paying in interest isn't going towards your future.
It's just the cost of borrowing for past spending.
Precisely. So less money is available down the road for saving, for investing, even just for daily living. You're essentially paying more for things you already bought using future money. That erodes your long-term security.
So, pulling it together, the message seems to be that being disciplined with debt, or ideally avoiding it, is kind of fundamental to this idea of being a good steward of your finances.
That's it, exactly. It's about handling the resources you have responsibly and just recognizing the very real ways that mismanaged debt can undermine your well-being and your future.
Okay, let's flip that then. If those are the downsides, what are the positives? What happens when debt is managed well or even, wiped out completely?
Oh, the benefits are huge, really liberating. I think the biggest one is just genuine financial freedom.
Freedom, yeah.
When those debt payments disappear, suddenly that chunk of your income is yours again. You have so much more control, more choice. It opens up possibilities, saving, investing, being more generous.
That does sound powerful, just having that choice back. What's the second major upside?
Tied closely to the downside of stress is the upside of, well, peace. A significant drop in stress and anxiety.
The relief.
Yes. Getting rid of that debt burden often brings this huge sense of relief. It frees up so much mental and emotional bandwidth, energy you can use for positive things instead of
I
worrying.
can imagine. Just not having that weight, that constant calculation in the back of your mind.
Hmm.
Okay, and a third benefit.
The third one often shows up in relationships, especially in families. We mentioned financial fights being a big issue.
Right, a major source of conflict.
So when you manage debt wisely or get rid of it, that source of friction can dramatically decrease. It can really strengthen family bonds. The author of Your Finances God's Way even suggests, kind of interestingly, that maybe fewer couples would need financial counseling if they followed these principles more.
Wow, that's a bold claim, but it makes sense. It really shows how our money life and our relationship life are intertwined.
They really are.
So managing debt well isn't just about the math then. It's about fostering a life with more peace, more freedom, stronger relationships, which all sounds like it fits right into that idea of responsible stewardship.
Perfectly. It lets you live more from your values and goals rather than just reacting to payment deadlines.
Okay, this all makes a strong case. But how do people do it? What are the actual practical strategies our sources talk about for managing debt wisely?
There are several key things that come up again and again. The first one is probably the bedrock. Live below your means.
Spend less than you earn. Sounds simple, but
It is simple in concept, but crucial. You have to create that gap between income and expenses. That surplus is what you use to pay down debt and, just as importantly, stop adding new debt. And this applies no matter how much you earn. It's about the ratio.
got it. Create the margin. What's next?
The second big strategy is to actively, intentionally prioritize paying off existing debt. Don't just make minimum payments if you can help it.
Be proactive about it.
Exactly. Look for ways to throw extra money at it. The author of that book we mentioned, he gives an example of how his family would use like tax refunds or even an inheritance specifically to hammer down their mortgage or other loans faster.
So seize those opportunities to make a dent. Okay, strategy number 3.
Number 3 is all about budgeting and planning. You need a plan for your money. That's what a budget is.
Knowing where it's going.
Yes. And the sources strongly suggest tracking your spending first, maybe for like 30 days, just to get a really honest picture, see where the leaks are. Then you categorize things and build a spending plan, a budget that aligns with your goals, like getting out of debt.
Are there tools mentioned?
Yeah, they mention things like using budget worksheets and specifically call out the debt snowball calculator as a useful tool. That's the method where you tackle the smallest debts first for motivation.
Right, build momentum. Okay, tracking, budgeting tools. What's the final strategy?
The last one is sometimes called putting off and putting on. It's sort of a behavioral thing. It
Yeah.
means consciously stopping the habits that lead to debt, putting off things like maybe impulsive buying or wasteful spending, and at the same time, putting on or adopting habits that reduce debt like consistent extra payments, or just being patient before making a big purchase.
So stop the bad habits, start the good ones. Like put off buying the fancy coffee every day and put on an automatic transfer to your debt payment.
Exactly like that. It's about changing those day-to-day actions. So these steps, living below means, prioritizing repayment, budgeting, changing habits, they might seem basic, but they're presented as really practical ways grounded in this wisdom tradition.
Makes sense. A clear path, rooted in self-discipline.
That's the idea, aligning your actions with the goal of freedom.
We've talked a lot about the personal and family benefits. How does managing debt well ripple outwards? Does it impact, say, our communities?
It definitely can. Within the family, like we said, less financial stress usually means a healthier marriage, maybe more quality time because you're not working crazy hours just to cover payments. Better family dynamics overall.
Less fighting about money is always good.
Always. And then think about work or your neighborhood. Someone under less financial pressure might just be a better colleague, more focused, maybe more positive.
Less stressed, less irritable maybe.
Could be. Financial worry is a heavy burden. Lifting it can change your whole demeanor, how you interact with people around you, neighbors, coworkers.
So individual financial health can kind of contribute to a more positive atmosphere generally. What about generosity? That came up earlier.
Yes, and this is a really key connection the sources make. Managing debt wisely, freeing up money, directly increases your capacity to be generous.
Makes sense. If the money isn't going to lenders.
It's available to help others, to answer that call, to support those in need, to give willingly, maybe even sacrificially. Often, our ability to really live generously is tied directly to our own financial freedom.
So it's like a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Getting your finances in order allows you to give more, which benefits the community.
That's exactly the connection they draw. It shows that responsible finance isn't just navel-gazing. It equips you to better serve and support the people around you.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, this deep dive, it feels like the consistent message from these sources is pretty clear. Debt is common, yes, but tackling it wisely, using these principles, leads towards, well, more freedom, less anxiety, better relationships.
A stronger sense of stewardship, and crucially, a greater ability to be generous.
Yeah, it's a holistic picture, isn't it? Not just about the money.
Definitely not. It's about a healthier, more purposeful way of living overall.
So for you listening, if this resonates, what's a practical first step? Based on what we've heard, especially that advice from Crown Financial Ministries, maybe just commit to tracking your spending for the next 30 days.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Just see where the money is actually going. It sounds basic, but it's foundational. You can find spending trackers online, simple budget worksheets, things like that.
And maybe while you're doing that, just pause and think.
Yeah.
How does my current relationship with debt line up with this idea of stewardship we've been talking about? Is there even one small change I could make, starting now, that could move me towards more freedom, more capacity to give?
That's a powerful question to ask. And if you want to go deeper, definitely check out resources from places like Crown Financial Ministries, or look into that book, Your Finances God's Way. See what specific budgeting or debt reduction strategies click with you and your situation.
Explore what works best for you on that journey towards financial freedom. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like debt is just everywhere in America these days. You hear about trillions in consumer debt, student loans hanging over people, massive corporate debts. It's huge.
It really is. And it's not just the numbers, is it? It's the human side. The stress, the
And
anxiety.
they're kept up at night worrying.
Yeah.
And they even say financial stress is like a top reason for relationship problems.
Exactly. So the big question we're tackling is this just how it is now? Is racking up debt unavoidable, or is there maybe another way to think about it?
That's where we're getting into. We're looking at managing debt, but through a specific lens, these sort of timeless biblical ideas about handling finances, about stewardship.
Yeah. So for this deep dive, we want to really unpack what our sources say. What are the real risks if you don't manage debt well? What are the upsides if you do?
And maybe find some practical ways to actually get free from it based on these principles.
Sounds good. So where do we start? What's the sort of foundational view on debt from this perspective?
Okay, yeah, let's start there. What does the Bible actually say about owing money?
Well, the general feel isn't like a strict never do this. It's more like proceed with extreme caution. The potential dangers are really emphasized.